Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. Great to have you. My name is Nisha Trivedi, and I'm a senior consultant with MBA Mission. And I'm excited to do this session today about Michigan Ross because I'm actually a Michigan Ross alumna. I graduated in 2012 and had a wonderful experience at Ross. So I'm excited to share the details with you. Just a little bit about MBA Mission. MBA Mission is a full-time MBA admissions consulting firm. We have a network of admissions consultants who, like I said, do this full time. Our commitment is to help applicants put their best foot forward in their applications. We have, from everything from essay writing to interviews to brainstorming to advice on recommendations. So, you name it, we help out with that. So definitely, if you get a second, and if you haven't been on our site, definitely check it out at mbamission.com. We have a lot of free guides. And of course, information on our services and a blog that has some really good tips to guide you through the process. So yeah, definitely check it out when you get the chance. But today I wanted to give you, like I said, a little bit of just some insight on Michigan Ross, what the school is like, what the students are like, and what the admissions committee looks for in candidates, and also some valuable insights on the interview process. So with that, I'm going to get started with the slide presentation. Okay, so that's it about me. And then, so with Michigan Ross, just wanted to tell you, first of all, about what characterizes the program. A lot of people, do ask me, as part of this job, and then also outside of it, what's Ross like? And the motto of the school, I think, is very telling. It says that it's developing leaders who make a positive difference in the world. Ross's mission really is to make sure that, not just developing business leaders, but those who are conscious of the impact that they're making on the world. And in terms of how it strives to fulfill its motto, it takes some approaches, right? First, it's just a positive approach, right? Knowing that, positive business practices are the key to realizing society's most pressing issues. They understand that solutions often they're not confined to one sector. They involve multiple sectors, multiple types of people, multiple functions, and that to be a really effective problem solver, one has to be conscious of all of these factors. And, speaking of that, analytical rigor in terms of approaching the problems is also really important. And, that's going to set the foundation going forward for all business decision making. And, obviously we've seen that with the big trend on big data, and of course, all of the fields that involve analytics. So they're very conscious of that. And one big tenet of Ross is action-based learning. They know that, obviously, that there's the knowledge and skills that can be gained in the classroom, but really can only be developed through action-based learning. And speaking of action-based learning, one of Ross's big differentiators is the multidisciplinary action project, known as MAP. So what it is it's a cross-functional real-time problem-solving, group situation. So with MAP, this takes place the end of the first year. So basically that you could see that last few months, like the last 3 months or so, where students work in teams of about 4 to 6 on consulting projects for nonprofits or for-profit organizations in the US or worldwide. For example, I did my MAP project in a team of 6 for eBay. We were trying to figure out a strategy to help its buyers and its sellers, the buyers and the sellers of its site, interact better. So very interesting project, but I had classmates work with nonprofit organizations, with consumer packaged goods organizations, even with sports teams. So, a lot of opportunity there to really take our core curriculum learnings and apply it to a real scenario. And in a lot of cases, the organizations ended up implementing the recommendations that were set forth by Ross students. So definitely some very exciting stuff. There's also the Ross Leadership Initiative. So this is a required 2-year program that exposes students to leadership opportunities, right? So just to help everybody develop their leadership capabilities. And it starts as soon as you get to campus through the activities that take place in orientation, then all the way up to that last project that you do the end of the second year in the Leadership Odyssey. So definitely recognizes how important leadership is in the business world and beyond. And then
Hi,
also,
Nicole, are you sharing your screen right now? We can't seem to see your screen.
yes, I believe I am, but let me go back for a second
Thank you.
and make sure. There we go.
Yeah, we're good.
But let's see, just going to put it back on presentation. Yep, so a lot of the stuff is, yeah, we pretty much already went over, but I'm at the part that's on the academic curriculum, right? So we talked about MAP, we talked about the RLI, and the other thing I wanted to mention is the joint degrees. There's many joint degrees offered in conjunction with the MBA. A few of them that are especially popular is the MBA with the Masters of Public Policy. Definitely had a lot of classmates do that. And then the degree with the Ross School of Business and the Herb Institute. So for people who are really interested in environment and sustainability, those are some really, those are some really popular options, but there are more than 20 offered. So the thing about Ross is that you have access to not just the business school, but really the greater Michigan network. So it's, it's a very comprehensive experience. And in terms of what characterizes the students at Ross, I would say that, not just based on my personal experience, but what I've heard from countless others, is that they're exceptionally collaborative, friendly, and humble. A lot of business schools do say, we've got a collaborative environment, our students are, we have a strong network, no school is going to say that they don't have those things, right? And to a great extent they do, but with Ross, really, it's a place where students who are, very well accomplished, right, professionally and personally, they really check their egos at the door. They do, and they, I've seen Ross students and alumni go out of their way to help each other, right? Whether it's, in understanding course concepts, whether it's, preparing for interviews, whether it's securing a valuable professional connection. So really top-notch community. And I would say also that Ross students are fairly socially conscious, right? A lot of them, came in with experience in community service. There's opportunities at Ross to really exercise that, the social impact skills. So for example, at Ross, there's something called board fellows where you can sit in on a local nonprofit board and assist them with their strategic decisions, and a social venture fund, right? So for people interested in impact investing, an actual fund where they can begin building and exercising those skills in real time. And I would say almost above all, Ross students are very passionate about the program and about all things Michigan. Go Blue, in case you haven't heard, is the standard greeting for students and alumni. There's many times where I've run into Ross alumni, even people I don't even know, but they're wearing the shirt and we just say Go Blue. It's just a thing. And most Saturdays in the fall is, that's when the football games are. And you'll see, Saturday at noon or whenever the game is, everybody walking, from their, respective places on campus to the stadium, just kind of in a maize and blue mob. People get really into the football games especially, but then also the basketball and hockey games. And really, there's just a school spirit that transcends Ross and into the whole university. So that's a very exciting thing to be a part of for many people. And then in terms of what it looks for in candidates, really, it in the business school admissions process is holistic in general, right? I would say Ross especially, I would say there's no single factor that determines the outcome. They really do look at a broad, they really do look at it, the applications with broad criteria, right? And I would say the three main criteria are, first, there's your intellectual ability, right? Obviously, they want people who are capable of succeeding in the classroom, that they've challenged themselves, they have quantitative skills, English language skills, and this is obviously shown in, like, let's say your GPA, your GMAT, and any other courses or certifications you've taken. And then, of course, there's your professional and personal achievements. This is going to be your career path and your, progression. So, how well have you progressed in your career? Whether it's in responsibility and position and compensation, and then of course above all the impact that you've made in the roles that you've held, and what that says about what's your potential to succeed in your future endeavors, your short and long-term goals. And with that, they want to see that you have clear short and long-term goals, especially in post-MBA goals, and a clear sense of how is Michigan Ross going to help with that. Why is Ross the right school for you? So communicating that fit along with your future plans is really important. And then, given what I said about the community, how collaborative it is, and how teamwork is important, they are very much looking for interpersonal communication and teamwork skills. They want to make sure that people can, engage in teamwork with a diverse range of individuals. The Ross class is very diverse, and they know that obviously in your future endeavors, you're going to be dealing with people from all kinds of backgrounds. And they want to know that you can do that and that you can present yourself well. So those are definitely things that that they look for. In terms of why, what might make Ross the right school for you is, if you feel like you're able to, fulfill, these three criteria, and that you have a well-balanced candidacy, right? So you've succeeded in, leadership opportunities, in teamwork, you've shown, maturity and the ability to, to innovate, to add value to the positions you've been in. That's important. Of course, if you're socially active, that doesn't mean that, you 100% have to have done community service going in, but, that you've shown that you have a, that, being socially conscious, that's something that's important to you, or you've had passions outside of work, right? Whatever those might be, they want to see that you're well-rounded. And then if you're interested in sustainable energy, like I said, there's the Ross, that dual herb degree. They know that there are definitely candidates who come in who are, very focused on that. But in general, even if you are interested in sustainable energy, there's just a lot of resources for you to dig into that. And if you like action-based practical approaches to learning. So like I said, there's the MAT project, which is really the, biggest example of action-based learning, but there are definitely other courses and definitely other opportunities to have those practical approaches. So if that's something that you're into, then, then Ross could very much be the right place for you. And then I thought I'd talk a little bit about the interview and give you some insight into, what to expect. So just to give some insight into what the process is like at Ross. Several years ago, they started doing something that's called the team exercise. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So if you're invited to interview, you have several options, right? You can, there's a team exercise that's offered, and it is optional, right? And it is offered to students who choose to travel to campus for their interview, the on-campus interview. And so what the team exercise involves is basically you're working with another group of applicants on, different, it's nothing that requires any advanced preparation, but it's basically on, different, scenarios, basically business scenarios, like, they need presentation. So basically you're working together on fleshing out and presenting a solution to a business, basically to a business issue. Nothing super complex, but just something that shows how well you think on your feet and interact with others, right? That's really the point of the exercise, to enable the school, or to enable yourself to give an opportunity to have the school observe how well do you interact with teams? What are your interpersonal skills like? And, once you do that, it's then followed by the individual interview, right? Which is probably the interview that you're used to hearing about, that one-on-one format. So with the team exercise, again, it's only offered to people who choose to interview on campus. If you interview off campus, let's say with an alumnus, then you don't do the team exercise. But I did want to make it clear that it is it's the on-campus and the off-campus interviews are given equal weight, right? I had a client last year who she'd already visited Ross, like the summer before she applied and interviewed. So when she got invited to interview, she decided based on her schedule, she would be better off doing an off-campus interview in New York where she lived, and she ended up getting in. So it's by no means required in order to get in. But just think of it this way: is that if you feel that you would benefit from showing the admissions committee your interpersonal skills and the way that you interact with your fellow students and possibly your future classmates, it can provide that valuable information. So if it's something you feel comfortable with, then you might, and if you haven't visited campus, which is always a fun experience, then that's something you might want to consider. But if you can't make it, if you're abroad, if you're away from campus, if interviewing on campus doesn't fit in with your schedule, then don't stress too much. So that's what I'll say about that. Now, in terms of the individual interview, which everybody would do, whether on campus or not, what I thought I would do is just go over some questions and, what are some good ways to approach them? And these questions aren't necessarily very super unique to Ross, but they are questions that, as we've seen with our clients and with our database over the years, they're questions that have gotten asked, pretty frequently. So just figured I'd give you some insights into how to approach each of them. So, first question is, it's pretty likely you'll be asked, well, why is Ross the right school for you, right? And, in any interview, why is X program the right school for you? So I would say that to give an effective answer, you will have had to have really done your research on the program, right? And in the application, of course, there is an essay that asks you, why Ross and how does it fit in with your goals? But, it's a pretty short essay, only 300 words, I believe. But this is really the opportunity, if you're asked this, to give insight into why is this school the best fit for you, right? And so you want to be specific. And you're going to see the word specific over and over again in the next few slides, because the key to good interviewing is to give specific details, right? And specific examples. So a good answer in terms of, why are you interviewing with Ross? Why are you interested in potentially going to Ross, is where you give specifics about, let's say, first of all, the program's culture, right? And that's where, with the culture, like I've mentioned, it's, it's collaborative, it's super friendly, people, there's just a lot of humility. And, I would say go beyond that, though, and talk about what have been your interactions with the community, right? In good writing, there's a saying that says, show, don't tell. So show them, what is it about the culture that's appealed to you, right? Maybe when you sat in on class, you really just enjoyed the interactions between the student and the professor, and the interactions between different teammates, if you got to observe them in a group. Maybe the alumni have gone out of their way to tell you about the program. Maybe the students have answered all of your questions very enthusiastically about the different clubs and classes, right? Maybe things like that. So think about what have been the interactions you've had with the community, whether in person or just, on the phone or emailing or however you've done your personal research. What have been those interactions that have made you think, what, this is the place for me, or, oh, I really want to be immersed with students who are just like this. So that's a note about the culture. And then, of course, if you are on campus, if you've been on campus, if you visited, give some insight into, how have you enjoyed the visit, right? Those details are important. In terms of the academics, what are maybe a couple of specific classes at Ross that you're excited about? What is it about math that you've heard that makes you think, oh, this is really valuable for me professionally and personally, right? And then, of course, what are some other organizations beyond the classroom, conferences, clubs that you would be interested in being involved in, given your experiences and your skills and your goals? So that's what would give a good answer. When I do mock interviews for clients, I sometimes tell them, well, here's a good little trick to remember as a framework. I think of it as the 3 C's. There's the culture, there's the classes, and there's the clubs, right? So that's just a simplified way of saying all of these. And that'll help you keep your answer concise and also make sure that you're hitting on most, if not all, of these in giving your answer. In terms of what's not a good answer, I would say one where you're just not as specific, right? So maybe you say, I really want a collaborative culture, and Ross is very collaborative. Well, that's true. It's not untrue, but it's, you want to give some insight into, well, how do you know it's collaborative? Why is that important to you, right? Or, some will say, I want a school that's good for, Ross has a good general management program, right? Well, it does, and actually it prides itself on having, being strong in general management, right? Not particularly just strong in finance or just strong in, something else. But at the same time, it's not its biggest differentiator, right? So I wouldn't dwell on the general management part too much. Maybe quick mention, but it shouldn't be one of your main reasons, if that makes sense. Or, that it's ranked highly, which it is, but, there are other schools that are too. So, you don't want to, you want to give reasons. The bottom line is you want to give reasons that are specific to you, right? Not reasons that you're telling the school what it already knows, or flattering it, but really reasons that are very specific to, what are you looking for in an MBA experience, both professionally and personally. And then also, you may be asked, what will you bring to Ross? Or how will you contribute to the community? Or, some variation of that. So what they want to know when they're asking this question is, well, what are you going to bring as much to Ross as you're going to take away from it, right? They want to know that you're going to be you're actively involved in the student body, and that the other students, your fellow students, will benefit from your skills and your expertise. So An effective answer is one where you are clear on what you hope to contribute, right? So, for example, if you're, especially maybe you have a finance background, and you know that the core finance class, that can be challenging for people who are not, who don't have that sort of background, and maybe you'll help students with the team exercises, or maybe you'll help, with students who might be, struggling with some of the concepts, or maybe you're really involved in, you've worked in marketing and you have experience with, creating content and writing. So maybe you'll want to be the VP of communication for the marketing club, right? So it's basically, you're talking about what you'll bring and in which setting. So not just, in that brings me to the not so good answer. One where you say, I'm a team player, so I'll be, really great in teams at Ross. Again, it's not untrue, right? But it's not specific enough. What you want to think about is, what is it that I can offer, and in which setting at Ross can I offer it? Because in that case, you'll be helping the interviewer picture you at the school, which is always effective. And of course, you'll be clear, you'll be showing further that you have knowledge about Ross, right? In terms of what it offers, both within and outside of the classroom. So that's how to tackle that question. And then there are interview questions that are known as behavioral questions, right? And what that means is that they're scenario based, right? Tell me about a time that you led a team. Tell me about a time that you worked well with a team or not worked well with a team. Things like that, where you're expected to draw upon your experience and take them inside the main details. So in order to tackle these questions in general, first I wanted to make a quick note about the STAR format, which some of you might have heard about. It might be new to some of you, but what this means is that STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. And this is a great format for your answers for these behavioral scenario type questions. So the S stands for situation. So situation is, basically what was the situation at hand, right? And task, and along with that is task. Like, what was the situation and what was the task in front of you, right? So basically just kind of outline the scenario. Action is, well, what were the specific actions that you took, either individually or in collaboration with others, and to address the situation at hand. R is result. So how did things turn out? What was the outcome? Did you save the company $10 million? Did you, win a national award? Did you get feedback from the CEO? I mean, obviously these are extreme examples, but, any sort of positive outcome, and, how your actions led to that outcome. So, that's what we're looking for. So in terms of that answer. So just a couple of quick examples of these, of these behavioral type questions. One is, what type of role do you play in team? Right. This is especially important to Ross because, like I said, teamwork is so core to Ross's value. So a good answer is one that, of course, is in the STAR format. But since it asks, what type of role you play in teams, the first thing you want to do is talk about, okay, what kind of teammate am I? Well, I'm the type of teammate who, really likes to be the taskmaster, right? I, keep us on time. I make sure that everyone knows their follow-ups. Maybe they're the type who makes sure that the group interactions are smooth, right? That can be tricky with a large or with a diverse team. Maybe you're the type who facilitates the discussion and makes sure everyone's heard. Whatever that might be, mention what that is. And then right after that, offer a specific example in the STAR format that illustrates that style, right? So then you're not just telling them, hey, this is my style, although you did tell them, but you're showing them, and this is how I've demonstrated it in the past, right? So, name the situation and the task, outline your actions clearly, and then, of course, the result that your actions led to. And when you use the STAR format, keep in mind the situation and the task, that should be brief, right? You only want to give as much information as is needed for the interviewer to understand what you're saying, which is not going to be a ton. And of course, they can ask follow-up questions if they really want to know more about the situation, but the bulk of your focus should be on the actions, right? So what actions did you take as a team member? What kind of team member were you? How did you interact with others? And then of course, how things turned out, the result. So that's something to keep in mind. So an answer that's not as effective to this specific question is, one that's too general. Maybe one that you say, I'm the type of team member who, makes sure that morale is high or something like that. Not bad, but okay, well, how have you done that, right? Like how shown that in the past. So that's why an example is required. And they're basically one that's, try to be, I would say fairly specific when you're talking about what kind of team member you are, just so they can understand your teamwork style. And of course, the one that's equally popular is, tell me about a time where you were a leader. And so again, star format, specific examples. You want to make it clear, well, first of all, of course, what the situation was. What were you leading? Like, what was in front of you, the challenge? What actions did you take as a leader, right? In some cases, you might have made decisions individually. In other cases, you might have had to consult others, whether others above you, others below you, or like, let's say people who are part of your team that you were managing. So what were those decisions? And then also, it can be very beneficial to highlight, was there a challenge you overcame, right? Because even if it was a successful example, which, in this case, it should be, right? An successful example of your team leadership, you want to, or just your leadership in general, it doesn't have to be smooth sailing. That's the thing. So if you overcame a challenge, so, let's say you are managing an important project with, many cross-functional people. But, one of the challenges you overcame partway through is that, one team member wasn't pulling their weight, right? And, you had to overcome that. But things turned out well in the end. Let's say you won the bid, you launched the product, whatever it was. It makes the story even richer in a way, right? If you overcame, if you were able to briefly touch upon a challenge that you overcame as you were being a successful leader. So if your story has that, then all the better. And then I would say, one that's not as effective is going to be one where, it's, a few things here, right? If it's not structured, where it's hard to follow, like, okay, were you leading? Were you on a team? Wait, what was the situation again? One where it's just not easy to follow, which means that chances are it's probably not in the star format. That can be hard for the interviewer to follow along, right? Or if it doesn't highlight leadership, right? Maybe it's something you were involved in, but it's not clear of like, okay, so you did this and that, but let's say, for example, in this story, you use the word we a lot. Well, we did this, we did that. Okay, but what did you do, right? You were the leader. So what were the actions that you took that demonstrates leadership? So you want to make sure that you highlight leadership clearly if that's what you're being asked about. And, with these behavioral questions, I would say that time-wise, you really don't want it to go on for more than, like, let's say 2 minutes or so, more or less. You want to be concise, one, because, you want to make sure the interviewer, you hold their attention, but also because you don't want to, get into a situation where the interviewer doesn't have the opportunity to ask all the questions that they were planning to ask and to, gauge what they wanted to gauge, right? Because then, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to present a well-rounded view of yourself, which is, ultimately the goal of you in the interview. So those are just some things to keep in mind. And then everybody's favorite question, right? What are your strengths and weaknesses? So this is definitely one that, people actually is not anyone's favorite really. But here's some good tips on how to answer them, right? So in terms of your strengths, right? So, if you say, I have great communication skills, right? Well, that's a totally legit strength. How have you demonstrated that? And what I don't mean is that you have to launch into a whole star format story, right? Not here. You can say, for example, I'm responsible for creating a memo that goes directly to the director of operations every week, and that has to, communicate all of the top developments of the week, my recommendations, and they've been able to act on that successfully. Something like that, where you're giving it, you're illustrating it with a brief example of the strength. You're not going on and on, but you're showing and you're not telling, right? So that I would do. Weakness, this one's, of course, this is the real trick part of it. This is one where you want to frame it as, not, oh, I'm really bad at this, right? But it's really more in what's an area that you're working on, that you've made progress on and that you're continuously improving. So, here's an example. So I can say, when I first started working, I was in some team meetings, and I was really afraid of sharing my ideas in the team because I thought, well, what if I'm ridiculed? What if what I say is flat out wrong? So, I keep my thoughts to myself. But then I got the feedback from my manager that, you do need to speak up. I know you have good ideas. Why aren't you sharing them, right? So that's something that I worked on, and I made sure to participate more in, future meetings. I might even tell myself, make sure to speak up at least twice, even if it's echoing, like agreeing with someone else's comment, just to be comfortable. And now I feel like I've definitely made, great strides in terms of sharing my ideas, with the team. But, it's something that I always am conscious of and making sure that I'm continuously improving on, right? So it's not, if I frame it like this, it's not, oh, I'm not so great at sharing my ideas, or I'm really shy. It's more like, hey, here's something that in my past was brought to my attention. I've worked on it, and this is where I am now. But of course, since I'm, nobody's perfect, I'm still trying to, it's something that I'm just continuously refining. So that's the way to frame a weakness. An answer that's not as effective is, one that, obviously when you're highlighting your strengths, you definitely want to, you're highlighting your strengths, right? But there's a fine line between, highlighting and, and just bragging and saying, I am the best, analytic person anyone's ever seen. Well, I don't think that's actually very common, but, of course I have to put it in here. The weaknesses, this is even trickier, right? So let's say if you're claiming weaknesses that aren't true weaknesses, right? So if you say, I'm a perfectionist, or I work too hard, or sometimes I just care too much. These aren't weaknesses, and this is really going to probably just rub the interviewer the wrong way. And really more so, it's not going to tell them much about you, right? It's just way too political an answer, right? So what's better is to take the approach of talking about something that you have, something that you've worked on, right? Maybe some feedback you've gotten in the past. Or, nor do you want to mention weaknesses that are problematic, right? Sometimes I don't get along with others. Sometimes I lose my temper. Sometimes I just can't keep track of the details. Again, you don't want to go there. It's really going to be about talk about, again, something that you've developed or, preferably have greatly improved in from earlier in your career. And then another popular interview question is, tell me about a time where, let's say, you handled a conflict or a difficult situation, or something of that variation, where they want to see, what are your problem solving skills like. So in terms of an answer that's an effective answer, it's going to be, again, that STAR format, one that talks about the situation and the task, and then especially the action and the result. And then, of course, clearly highlights what was the conflict, right? It's something that you don't want it to get buried, right? You don't want the interviewer to guess, well, what was the conflict here? You want to make it very clear up front. This was the conflict, and I knew it had to be resolved, so I did X, Y, and Z. And hopefully that X, Y, and Z somewhere involved some communication, right? Understanding, well, there's somebody who, maybe it's a direct conflict with you, right? Maybe there's somebody who has a totally different idea or a point of view, and hopefully that resolution involves understanding the point of view, right? Or if it's, trying to solve a conflict between others, understanding, well, what's the root of that conflict, right? And then, of course, you want to talk about what the resolution was. How did things turn out? Were you successful at resolving the conflict or the difficult situation? An answer that's not as good is going to be one that's, again, one that's unstructured, where they might wonder, well, wait, what was the, they talked about the story, but I'm not clear exactly what was at odds or what the conflict was, or I'm not sure what they did to, I'm not sure what this candidate did to actually, actively resolve the conflict or the situation, right? It's maybe not clear, or it's not clear what they did personally. If you use the word, for example, like I said before in the previous slide, we versus I, you want to make sure that you're balancing it. If you're saying, well, we did this or we did that, it's not going to show, well, what did you do? What were you responsible for, in addition to stuff that you might have done with others? So those are a couple of things. Or, if you assign blame and say, the boss was terrible, so, the person was just full of conflict, but this is how I try to make it better. Something where you're maybe, saying something about someone's character that's not so good, or you're, almost assigning, well, whose fault was the conflict in the first place? That's what you don't want to do. You don't want to assign blame. And then, of course, at the end of the interview, you're very often asked, do you have any questions for me? Right? And people always wonder, what do I ask them? And of course, it's going to matter whether you're interviewing with somebody from the admissions committee, a student, or an alumnus of the program, right? So with a student or with students and alumni, it's a little easier because you can ask them about their experience, right? And especially in Ross's case, because I would say most everyone who went to Ross just loved it, so they can just go on and on about their experience. So you can't go wrong by saying, asking questions like, what, especially if, for recent, for students or for recent alumni. What was your favorite class? Or, tell me about your math experience, so something like that. Or, questions like, what surprised you about Ross? Or what's some advice that you would give to incoming students to help them hit the ground running, right? Or, if there's common ground, let's say you're both in, finance or marketing, you can ask questions about those professional clubs or about the recruiting experience, things that are very, relevant to you and things that they can speak closely to. So those are definitely some things you can do. And of course, during the conversation, they might, give information about their background, stuff like that, that might, trigger some questions. But either way, you really can't go wrong with asking, them to speak about their experience in areas that interest you. With the admissions officers, it's a little different, obviously, because they are not, they're not students. They did not go through the program, although, there are alumni who worked in admissions. But really what you want to ask them is more, I guess, more macro level, like really about the program, right? So for example, one question you can ask that helps you communicate your knowledge about the culture is, you don't want to ask them, well, what's the Ross culture like, right? I mean, that's your job to figure it out. But if you want to say, in my observations and, in talking to students, alumni, and in, visiting campus and attending class, it seems that, let's say, whatever your observation is, it seems that Ross students are just exceptionally willing to share their insights or to help each other, or that professors really enjoy being challenged. Is this, is this how you would characterize the school as well, right? So you're asking a question, but you're showing your knowledge. Or, or if, let's say, the school, if it's not Ross, if it's another program, if there's a new dean, if there's a new program in place that you've read about, you can, ask them about that, what their thoughts are about that development. One question I like to interview, or that I like to recommend to clients who I'm mock interviewing is, you can ask them, I understand that you're, that as an admissions committee member, you're trying to recruit people from a variety of backgrounds, right? Different professions, different nationalities, and so forth. But what are some common characteristics of students who you feel have been most successful in the program, right? So that is a way to learn about the culture and what the school is looking for, both at once. So those are just some examples of questions that you can ask, somebody who's on the admissions committee. So depends on who you interview with. And then of course, the team-based exercise, if you do go to campus and if you participate in that, which I'd recommend if you feel like it's something you would enjoy and do well, and if it's if you can get to campus relatively easily, in that case, you really want to show your interpersonal skills, right? So in the team exercise, you don't have to be, it's not like you have to be the most vocal person, but, definitely be engaged, be enthusiastic, take the opportunity to present, to maybe be one of the presenters at the end if you can, although, not 100% required, but a lot of times in the team, like everybody can present their idea, which is nice. Make sure that, for example, if you're, working in a team, if you've got quieter members, maybe gently try to draw them out. Affirm people's ideas, say, oh, hey, Bob, that's a really good idea. I really like that because of this. Or, Susan, I think that you were just trying to make a point about this. I'd love to hear more. Or, things like that show that you're trying to, you're trying to work well with your team members, right? And you're trying to give voice to, people who might be a little bit on the quieter side. So those are a couple of techniques when working with the team. And then, of course, we were talking about, teamwork style. If you want to take the role of, in your team exercise, keeping the group on task, making sure you're finishing the exercise in time, those are ways to, show some good teamwork and leadership as well. So definitely some tips on how to make a good impression in that team exercise if you do participate in that. But yeah, the individual interview will be for everyone. So, yep, that is the that is the end of the presentation. I'm going to go back to the screen and hopefully you guys can see me. I hope that you found this really helpful. I know that, it's a very competitive process, and it can be stressful, but hopefully what I've been able to do is shed some light on on Ross and what the process is like, so that you feel like you're a bit more a bit more cognizant of what to expect in the interview process, which can, like I said, it can be very consuming and it can seem like such a mystery, but, Ross, really prides itself on being very transparent with its candidates. Every year they update their blog and they talk about, the interview process, when exactly they're sending out interview invites, a bit about what to expect. They give a lot of very clear details on the team-based exercise, so you can decide whether that's right for you. And, in terms of your application, like before you even get to the interview part, of course, if you're applying next year, what I would say is, obviously, be yourself, which sounds cliche, but it's very, very important in any application. But, depending on what the essays are, this year there were some mini essays that ask you to share different parts of your experience. Try to share things that are both within and outside of work, right? Because you're trying to show a multidimensional view of yourself. And also in the essay where you get the opportunity to do so, give some specifics about, well, why Ross, right? What are some resources at Ross that are going to help you meet the career goals that you've stated, right? Your short-term post-MBA goal and your long-term goal, let's say 5-10 years down the ride. So you want to make sure that you're linking your goals clearly to what Ross has to offer, and that you're enthusiastic about the community. And that, of course, will come out in the application as well as in the interview. So, be yourself and be, very clear about, what you want out of the program and how it can hopefully deliver. And I think if you do that, then you'll definitely be in a good place. And, as you're preparing for the process, definitely visit MBA Mission. We've got a lot of, like I said, a lot of free guides and, services that can help you with interview prep, with, with essays, with, the whole bit, as well as just some free resources, the guides and the blog that can give you some tips along the way of how to tackle each step of the application process. And then GMAT Club, which you've probably been on many times, GMAT Club has some wonderful resources on, different, GMAT practice questions, on different guides, on forums where applicants from certain schools can talk to each other and figure out where you are in the process. And there's even a section called Ask MBA Mission, where you can ask a few of us admissions consultants answer these boards every day of the week almost. So if you have questions about, basic questions about your profile or about the application process, we can help answer those. So a lot of great resources at GMAT Club, some, really terrific people running that. So definitely visit that site regularly as you're going through the process. But with that, I think that's about it. So again, thank you so much for joining. Definitely visit mbamission.com and gmatclub.com as you're going through the process. And to all of you, very best of luck with applying to Ross and with everywhere else. Thank you.